Universal greetings of peace, love, and justice. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's not every day that a Yemeni kid from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and the Tenderloin, San Francisco, makes it to Yale. So I'm really honored that you donated your time today to be here with me to hear my story. I spent a good part of the last few weeks trying to figure out what I would talk to you about. It's easier for me sometimes to talk about things regarding coffee, business, the history of coffee. But Sidi Abdurrahman and Imam Allah asked me to talk about a different topic, a topic that comes out through my story, and that is how to find our calling in life. I hope that as you hear my story tonight, you think about that question. That is, why am I here? What is my purpose? What do I want to do while I'm on this planet? These are questions that sort of echo in our minds, and for a long time, I was terrified of that question. So I think start at the beginning of things here. Okay, something that will work. Here you can figure it out for me. But I'll start a little bit so you guys can use your imagination. So I'll begin at the beginning. I think that we should start. I was actually born in Liverpool, England. I'm an undercover scouser, so you know what that is. But my family was really in transit, leading a different kind of war women. And then for the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Like my part.
It does.
I can just move it from there. That's easier. And yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, before it was gluten-free. It's sad. I went recently to visit my old neighborhood, and you know, my dad's old bodega, the Sicilian pizza store, the Korean restaurant, all these things I grew up around were gone. And it was sad to see that change. But as I grew up, my family moved from New York to San Francisco. My dad had a pretty successful business, and he felt at one point in his life that he did not want to continue doing that because he was, as Muslims, we're not supposed to sell liquor. And he saw firsthand effects of liquor into the urban cities in Africa, especially in these neighborhoods. And so, as a young kid, I went from living a pretty good life early on. We moved when I was 9 years old. From that life to this neighborhood in San Francisco called the Tenderloin. And great, it works. You can go back though. Perfect. And as Dave Chappelle, when he described my neighborhood, he said in his comedy bit, "What It's Worth," he said, "Ain't nothing tender about that place." It was hard growing up as a kid in that environment. My dad became a bus driver, and so he decided that he wanted to stick to his principles and values as a Muslim, and he did not want to sell poison in communities, it's particularly in inner cities where alcohol is cheaper than water. And you know, on the other hand, there are also the cities that allow these hundreds, sometimes thousands of liquor permits to be licensed to businesses. So there's a systematic problem there in that regard. But I went from that to living here. And as a young kid, it was really hard trying to find your way. I am the oldest of 7 children. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for most of my life in the Tenderloin. But as much as it was a rough neighborhood, it was also a place of community, of diversity, a huge Vietnamese population. The neighborhood next to us was called Little Saigon. And a lot of Vietnamese moved to San Francisco. And as a young kid, it was hard growing up in these streets. You know, to see violence every day, to see people with addiction, mental illness. And it was just difficult seeing that every day in and out. And I think one of the hardest things, and one of the most difficult things, is when kids aren't allowed the ability to dream or to see themselves outside of the environment that they live in. and feel boxed in because of circumstance. And I felt that way for a while. And so the way I escaped this reality was I love, and I still love, books. And if you think about books, they're pretty radical. The idea that you can turn a few pages and be completely transformed and transported into a totally different place and a totally different time. And so I built these different characters. And I think one of my favorite books growing up was Harry Potter. Shout out to the Harry Potter fans. Wave your wands. I think a lot of young kids relate to that book because you kind of feel like, maybe I'm like Harry. Maybe I don't belong in this crazy family. And so as a kid reading that book, the idea that maybe I had a different destiny. Maybe this wasn't supposed to be my reality, and it was only temporary. And those ideas are very powerful. They really impacted me in ways I could never imagine, and they manifested themselves much later in my life. And so, growing up, it was difficult. My friends we weren't the best kids. We always got into a lot of trouble. And it was hard for me, particularly because my dad was a bus driver. And they always changed his bus route. And so, I never knew which bus he was on. One of my favorite parts in the book, Dave, he describes my father as this 40-foot conscience that kind of roamed around the city. And so after that, I forgot about coffee for a long time. I know a little bit about the history of coffee, but nothing much really. It wasn't until much later in my life. I think that we're all a product of our environment and times that we live in. And as much as this country has an incredible history, it also has a very dark history. And this dates back to the slave trade of African American brothers and sisters who came here, who were brought here. The Native American genocide. What happened to Jewish Americans, Irish Americans, the Chinese Inclusion Act, the Japanese internment camps, Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, and all these things. And it's really unfortunate we live in we're in this place right now. But it's important to understand this difficult reality too, because it still echoes and it still unfortunately occurs in our times today. And so I grew up as a Muslim, as an Arab man. After 9/11, things were very difficult for us. Oftentimes I speak to a crowd of people who don't share my experience, but you know how it was and how it still is. We became the new target. And so I found myself oftentimes translating for the local imam and different city offices. And I began to work with a lot of incredible and wonderful and powerful civil rights organizations like the ACLU and the Asian Law Caucus and the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I found my place in between these as a bridge. And at that point I thought maybe I should be a lawyer. And my parents, when I told that to my parents, they loved that idea. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a lawyer. So everything I did at that point was around this vision. I was going to go finish my undergrad, go do a joint JD and PP, work in local government. At that time, I did a lot of work in the mayor's office in San Francisco. And so I knew my way around the city politics. But my parents were very poor, so college was something that was hard for me to think about. I didn't have much resources, and so I had to figure out ways to overcome that. So at this time in my life, this is my late teens, early 20s now, I was working as a paralegal for a nonprofit based in the Mission District in SF. And we provided immigration help to low-income immigrants trying to navigate our crazy immigration system. That makes absolutely no sense, by the way. And so I did that. I went to school. I did events in the mayor's office and rallies, and on the weekends I worked as a doorman in that building. These two tall green towers. The title they gave me wasn't a doorman. They called us lobby ambassadors. They wanted us to feel somewhat special about that. But essentially, I just sat on a desk, and anyone who came in, what I would do is I would be sitting down here, managing the computer, answering phone calls, dealing with packages. But as soon as someone came in the door, entered or left, I had to stop what I was doing and run as fast as I could hold my posture, breathe in, and then open the door for them. And it really just sucked, to be honest. Because where I sat comfortably at that desk, there was actually a button that opened the door. But that wasn't the point. They wanted this extra personal touch. And so, again, books played a big role in my life. But this time I was reading different types of books. I was reading Dos Capital. I was reading James Baldwin, and Said, Fred Fanon. And I began to see these different systems of oppression and why I was where I was and why the people who I went to school with, it wasn't by coincidence that none of us really made it. And I felt really angry, and I didn't like to be put somewhere. And so for a long time I was bitter. And I almost thought, man, I wish I didn't know these things. Sometimes ignorance can be better than knowledge. But I don't think so, really. Because deep down, I knew that I needed to figure a way to beat the system. It can't stop me from being what I want to do and being who I want to be. But you feel stuck. And this is a point and a place I want to stop and really talk about more. I don't talk about this specific point in my life because it's very hard to talk about, to be honest. It wasn't that long ago. And it opens up old memories and feelings that were very hard to deal with. Feelings of just feeling very stuck in life, right? A lot of us, before college, in college, and even after college, we don't know what is our next move going to be. Society has, these pressures for us. Our family has pressure upon us, and especially when you're, people going to these people like that at a university. Your parents made it here through a difficult journey. Raise your hand if your parents immigrated to this country. Wow. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you hear those stories of, when your dad says, I came to this country with $20 in my pocket. And look what I made. You're just lazy. You hear that a lot. Millennials, we're lazy. We spend our time on social media, And we hear that the idea of the American dream. This faraway idea that this is a land where you can be anyone and be anything and do anything you want. But then we also look at the reality. Student debt, oversaturated markets, all the AI. These things are just they're very difficult. And so as a young person, I really felt stuck. And I didn't know how to answer that question of, what is my purpose in this life? The idea of finding something that gives you meaning, that makes you fulfilled, it wasn't really relevant at that time. We're not taught to think about things that way. Unfortunately, we're taught to think about material success, status, and these things. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people who follow that path, and I was afraid to follow that path, you do something. I think my biggest fear wasn't not succeeding in materially or figuring out that career path, was doing that and then being in my 50s and you realize that I'm not happy with where I am and I wasted my entire life doing something that is making me happy. And so this is something that I thought about for a long time. And how do you find your place, right? That's the second question that comes about. Sometimes the place finds you. Your path finds you. We all have our gifts. And it's up to us to find out, what is that gift? What am I good at? What do I love? And how do I manifest that into the world? And follow that path. And it's okay to not know what your gift is early on. And it's okay to reinvent yourself many times. The important thing is that if I'm not happy, if you're not happy, pivot. Make those beautiful pivots in life. And so I was here working as a doorman, and this was probably one of my lowest points in life. My friends in college were now finishing college and starting their career paths. And I'm getting, to my mid-20s now almost, and I'm stuck opening doors for people. And so, for me, I think a lot of us have this idea that maybe we need this really epic, life-changing moment, some near-death experience, or some sage, person's going to come and give us some wise advice and be on his way. But it could be something as simple as even a text message, and that's what happened to me. On October 1st, 2013, at 12:02 p.m., approximately, I got a text message from one of my friends. He tells me, hey, there's a statue of a weird Yemeni dude next to your job drinking coffee. And so I didn't know what she was talking about. And so I crossed the street. And by the way, that building where I worked, it was where a lot of wealthy people lived. Both Sean Parker and Sean Penn had apartments there. And a lot of really big, which were then startups, like I think Spotify, Airbnb, and a few others started in that building. And so there was a lot of extreme wealth. And I saw this every day. So you could imagine me sitting there reading these books that were critical on class and race, like Das Kapital, and learning about the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and seeing these people walk in and out, crazy lifestyles. And so I crossed the street, my lunch break. I go and I see this statue. And I didn't know what it was. It was this beautiful Arab man, muscular shoulders, holding a cup of coffee to the sky. You know, wearing this long robe with a bunch of flowers, something an Arab man would never wear. But it was there. And so I started to research and who is this person? Where did it come from? Raise your hand if you've heard of a coffee company called the Hills Brothers. Okay, there's always a bit of a generational gap around this time. Usually the people who are a bit more wiser know who the Hills Brothers, who they are or were. But essentially they're a coffee company based in San Francisco. In the late 1800s, San Francisco was a very important place for coffee. Because all of the coffee that came from the Panama Canal, from places like Brazil and Colombia, landed in SF. And so San Francisco became a really powerful place for coffee. There were really important coffee dynasties that came about. Companies like the Folgers family was from San Francisco, and the Hills Brothers. And at this time, in the early 1900s, there was this really big love for Islamic and Middle Eastern motifs and architecture. You know, like the Shriners Temple in Chicago, which is now Bloomingdale's. You have in San Francisco, the Ferry Building Clock Tower. It's actually based off of a minaret in Seville, Spain. And the Hills Brothers decided to choose this statue that was supposed to represent someone in coffee, some monk. And so I walked through those doors behind there. By the way, this building is now owned by Google. I think Mozilla Firefox is based there, and the Wharton Business School is also in there. So if you ever get a chance to go to SF, make sure you make a stop, see out to the monkey, the seamless courtyard. But I walked through those gates of those doors, and in the lobby, they still have these pictures of the old coffee company, the first coffee lab it had, a coffee shop. And it was kind of like those Steven Spielberg movie moments where you walk in, the music plays, and I see these pictures, and it says Arabian coffee, best in the world, right? And these people who really pioneered coffee in the U.S. in many ways, and I didn't know anything about that, so I began to go down this kind of rabbit hole, trying to understand coffee and this connection between coffee and my connection to coffee, and so I went and I began to research this history. And within, I think, 6 months, I was here. It's very hard for me to describe Yemen and how really majestic, magnificent, incredible it is. This picture is one of my favorite ones, and it's in an area called Haras in northwestern Yemen, province of Sana'a. And in this village is about 2,500 meters above sea level. You can see they built these incredible buildings made of stone. And they live an untouched way of life, uninterrupted. They take care of the land takes care of them. And so after this research and learning about the history of coffee, I began to go to coffee shops, and I was obsessed with coffee. I told my parents I was going that summer to do a research project, which I wasn't lying to them. But really I went to study coffee. By that time I dropped out of college. And what I found when I went to Yemen was just the most incredible people who really were so warm. This is one of my favorite pictures, and it's actually from an area called Gorak. We have someone from Gorak here somewhere. If you look up in the top there, that's actually a village. And all those terraces are coffee plants that are grown. And this guy here trying to look like a brown Indiana Jones is me. I went there and I went to the port of Mocha. So for those who don't know, I think I'm not going to go into detail more afterwards because you're very lucky to have someone who knows a lot about coffee history also here. But there is actually a city in Yemen, a port called Mocha. And it really changed the world. And it's the reason why we're all here tonight. And so I learned that, in the 1400s, this place was the only place where coffee was bought and sold. Now there is a difference of opinion where coffee begins its journey between Yemen and another country. Who knows what that country is?
Turkey?
No, Kosovo. Ethiopia. And there's this age-old debate between Yemen and Ethiopia. Where coffee started? I'm probably the only Yemeni who thinks coffee began in Ethiopia. Look at Dr. Aziz right now, I'm trying to stay away from this slightly. But I think that as a plant, it began to grow indigenously there and wildly. And so it was the first place that coffee grew. But they didn't drink coffee. The early consumption of coffee in Ethiopia was that they took the coffee cherries and they would put animal fat around it and chew on that. Some kind of like keto diet. And so coffee eventually made its way to Yemen. And it was the first place where coffee was cultivated. In Yemen, there's a province called Ib, where I'm from, and also Dr. Aziz. And it's and in Ib is a district called Urdain. And Urdain is the first place where coffee begins to be cultivated. There's a rich history of migration between Ethiopia and Urdain in Yemen. In many ways, they almost share no borders for many centuries. The Ethiopian Aksumite Empire and the Nagash and the Neguse ruled into Yemen. The Yemeni empires ruled into Ethiopia and vice versa. So it was a beautiful cross-cultural connection. And so the word Urdain in Arabic, Urdain means two branches or twigs. They say that God, Allah, had brought down two twigs, Ruday and Bun wa Qat, the branches of Qat, which we'll get into later, and coffee that came from Ethiopia. And so it begins to be grown there and cultivated, and there was a man whose name is very important. And I want to make sure we bear and pay our respects to this person. So just a disclaimer, I am not the monk of Mokha. That title belongs to a man named Sheikh Ali ibn Umar Shamali, a monk or a scholar, Sufi scholar, who lived in Yemen, was born in Tarim, and had a school in the city of Mokha. And he's credited with writing the first written works on coffee in a book titled Inas al-Safwa bi-Anthas al-Qahwa. The people of self-purification of Safwa through the breaths of coffee. It doesn't sound the same in English, but and this was one of the turning points for me when I read. When I was younger, I was such a troublemaker that my parents got really worried. I mean, I was doing things I should not be doing at 12 and 13 years old, really ever. And so they took me to Yemen as sort of a boot camp. Really, that's what it was. And I think that if you haven't, you should go visit your family's countries where they're from. Sometimes it's really a good reminder. And I went and I saw people who were very poor. They seemed so happy though, what little they had, that it made me feel ashamed of my privilege, of the opportunities that I had in front of me. And I think that's very important because, especially when you start to notice and think that could have been me, had not my mom or dad or grandfather took that journey with his $20 or whatever it was, and came to this country, right? So that had a huge impact on me. My parents wanted me to become a Muslim scholar when I was younger, so I went to this really strict Muslim Islamic school. And in many ways I got to develop my academic skills in Arabic and in writing. And so that helped me much later in life. So when I read this book, or this page from this book, he said in Arabic these lines of poems that I will never forget. And he said, قال رحمه الله قهوة البني لأهل الغرام ساعدتني على طرد المنام وعانتني بعون الله على طاعة الله والناس نيامي لا تلوموني على شربي لها إنها شراب السادة الكرام. Can I translate that? He says what could be translated as, "O coffee, O story of love, you helped me repel away my sleep. You helped me stay awake and worship my Lord while people fell asleep. Don't blame me for my intense love for coffee. It is the drink of the righteous people." And that it is. So when I read that, there were so many connections, and at this point I felt that I had found my calling. More than a calling, I felt I found a mission. This is what I have to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I know nothing about business, supply chain management, marketing, agronomy, sensory analyzing, but I'm going to figure this out somehow. I think sometimes growing up here we have this kind of, for me it was this naive arrogance. Right? I don't know how else to describe it. And so after that, I learned about the history of coffee. And I learned about what coffee did for the world. Because when coffee went to Europe, a very magical thing, important thing happened that changed the world forever. Before coffee came to Europe, the drink of choice was alcohol. And so it's something that numbed your senses. So now we have something different. Something that heightened your senses. These scholars have believed God had brought down this plant to help us reach higher states of consciousness and intellect. So in these cities like London and Vienna and Paris and New Haven, people gathered around this beverage, and their intellectual curiosity was sparked and fueled. I always say that fuel, that oil powers factories and machines, and coffee powers humans and dreams. And so you had incredible places where philosophers gathered, musicians, writers, the first newspapers. Revolutions happened in coffee houses. The American, Russian, and French revolutions. The Boston Tea Party was planned in a coffee house called the Green Dragon, and so forth. And for me, that was my love. I love coffee, it's very delicious. But I love the possibility of coffee, and what impact it can have on us, and how we can build communities, and have these important places where we have intimate moments, which we'll get to in a bit. And so, after that, I made my way to Yemen. I traveled around Yemen. And it's hard. I hope I have this video here. Yes. I went to the port of Mokha, and I zigzagged to about 32 different places and regions in Yemen. I got to meet farmers and hear their stories and how wonderful they were. And I got to see a country and fall in love with it over and over again. I took this with my iPhone, just an amateur video, but you can see how they grew coffee. Those are coffee trees. And how they engineered this was absolutely astonishing to me. As far as the eye can see. What human capacity and what industries thinking can do that? People who are highly educated, highly evolved, not backwards people. And at one point, this was what brought coffee to the world and inspired so many things. So I went to these areas in Yemen, and I crossed, and yes, I lost 30 pounds. And I got malaria and tapeworms and a bunch of other things. But I got to meet these wonderful farmers and hear their stories. The first visit to a village, I'll never forget this. I go and meet the villagers. First of all, they welcome us with a zamin, which is a traditional Yemeni poem that's sung to welcome people. And they'll come and they'll sing the song, welcome you. And the woman will sing in the house. It's a beautiful, just moment, and they celebrate you. They love being hosts of Viyata. Being a host is it's deeply rooted in Yemeni and Arab tradition. Then we went around to see their coffee trees. Then after that, we had this incredible lunch. So first they would have one person from each household kind of line up in front of me. And then they started doing this numbering thing. And I'm like, what's going on here? And they explained to me, they're doing a lottery system to see who gets to host you. I was like, this is incredible, right? And then the way they took, when someone gives you something from their heart and they really want you, they give you the best of what they have. And they would actually get into debt. They would actually literally go get loans to be able to buy a lamb or sheep or something like that to be a generous host. And if you try to give them money in any way, they would be extremely offended. And so I just really touched by these farmers and what they were, and they didn't know I was going to work in coffee. My guise was I was a student. My grandfather told me, tell them you're a student, because everyone knows that students don't have money. And so that's what I told them. And so they were really just happy to see someone out. And so what we did is this is one of my favorite farmers, Haj Ali. So I was working with his family in his village called Beit Al in the district of Al-Hayman Khariji in Sana'a province. The coffee we have here today actually is from this village area. And so he sees me working with his family and he was really happy. He comes up to me with this bag he has on his back. And inside it, he had coffee cherries. So I looked at the bag and I saw the cherries. The bag actually is his underwear. And so I looked at it and, it's very disrespectful not to accept gifts in Indian culture, in most cultures, I think. And so I looked at it and I'm like, Haj Ali, thank you so much. I'll take the cherries, but you can keep your underwear. And he looked at me and he said, he says, don't feel embarrassed, I have one of these. It's yours. Disclaimer, we don't ship our coffees out that way. And so what we did is after lunch, we would get these long Mokha sessions, basically this drug called pot, which is a category 1 drug here. If it's fresh, in category 2 if it's dried. Ask me how I know. And essentially they chew this thing in these long rooms full of people, kind of like you are here tonight. And it's a mild stimulant. Technically it's categorized as a methamphetamine, but the problem with pot is that it takes up so much of Yemen's water resources. On average, 32% of Yemen's water resources go to this one drug, this plant. And in some areas, in the northern places like Sana'a, 50%. And for every one coffee farm, there are 7 pot farms. And when my parents were growing up, it was the opposite. It was kind of shame. No one thought about selling pot. It wasn't a shameful thing, but out of necessity. So you look at countries like Yemen or Afghanistan, they have the poppy seeds. It's not that they want to do this, but they, out of necessity, that's survival, they have to. Many farmers keep their parts of their coffee farms and they grow pot just as a way to survive their families. And so, what I would do, and I don't like to share the story much, but if you guys can relate, we would hang out in these long, called them diwans or majalis, living rooms, and people would chew this thing, right? And I would be in the corner in the front as their guest. And I would wait about 30 or 40 minutes or so. There's a particular chemical, cathepsin. I would wait until that chemical entered their bloodstream, and they're just fully in pot mode. And then I had this sort of Braveheart speech that I rehearsed, where I would talk about the history of coffee, the history of Mokha, and how coffee came to Europe and changed the world. How coffee right now is actually the second most drink or beverage after water. About the coffee cultures in Brooklyn and in Tokyo and in Paris. And all these wonderful things, and at the end I would bring them back to reality, to where they were today. Now there's no roads here, no one really cares about you. The few NGOs that go, they really take advantage of them and they just do photo ops. There's an unfortunate, I call it a non-profit industrial complex that happens. And all these things, and I would say, listen guys, I want to work with you together. This idea that if you do something different and we work together, we can change our situation, your situation. And I would always tell them this verse in the Quran that really I think hit home to them and me in many ways, where Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Indeed, God, Allah, will not change the condition of a people unless they change themselves. And I would have them repeat the last line like you guys did. So this was the idea. This is what I want to do with them. So we would get together, have lunch. The compromise was you can chew off for 20 or 30 minutes. Then we'd go and practice what we learned on the ground with them. So just FYI, I want you guys to understand the journey coffee takes. Besides the idea, the theme of trying to find our road or our path in life, I also want you to understand your power and your responsibility as consumers. You have a direct impact on the lives of so many people that produce the things that you wear, you eat, you drink, you use. And if we are not careful, those people can be exploited. And so, this is a coffee tree. Coffee is a fruit. The beans that we roast and drink, that's a seed. That coffee cherry has 2 seeds in it. typically, and 5 layers to the seeds. And if you look, it doesn't ripen the same. Some of it's green, yellow, orange, but when it's fully ripe, it's a red, a dark red. And farmers are supposed to hand select these ripe cherries. It's very labor intensive to do that. I remember when I met these farmers, I saw them really strict with them, meaning they took all the colors. And I asked them, I said, hey, listen, I told this farmer, if I paid you more money, could you just pick these ripe red cherries? She looked at me and said, if you paid me more money, I could pick rainbow colored cherries. And you have to understand that the correlation or the between labor and between what people are paid. My grandmother, my mom's mom, and my mom's siblings grew up in a small town in Southern California called Delano. And Delano is where Cesar Chavez was from and Lois Fuentes. And many people don't know, but the United Farm Workers Movement is an incredible movement of workers and pickers who fought for their rights as laborers in the 1970s in California. There were a lot of Muslims involved in that, particularly Yemenis who came to America, who knew how to work in the fields. And one man in particular, his name was Naji Laytullah. He spoke Spanish and he spoke Arabic and English, and he was an incredible labor leader who worked alongside Lois Fuentes and Cesar Chavez. And he was actually the first martyr in the United Farm Workers Movement. One day he was out picketing peacefully with his comrades, and he was hit on the head with a baton by a Kern County sheriff, and he died. And if you watch any documentaries of that movement, you'll notice there's a Muslim prayer where over 10,000 people in procession, led by Lois Fuentes and Cesar Chavez, paid their respect to this man. And so as a kid, I would go visit my grandmother, and I saw these laborers who today still work in the hot sun, 110 degrees. Every year, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes more die of heat stroke to produce our things, to make our cherries and our oranges. And that had an impact on me growing up, seeing that stuff. So I thought this is the cherries. After it gets picked, it has to be dried on these rooftops or on patios for a few weeks, right? Where people every day, every 3 or 4 hours, they're moving the cherries, making sure they dry evenly. By the way, one tree produces 1 pound of coffee for the whole year. That's about 25 cups. And the amount of labor it takes to produce these billions of cups of coffee per day it's incredible. After that, it goes to the mill where it gets sorted. And you sort by screen and by weight, and then hand sorted by eyes for 16 visual defects. After that, it gets exported out and imported, and it gets to a roaster. And I was today at Little B's Coffee and Tea, which you guys should check out. And the roaster is really an alchemist. They're using 3 types of heat to bring out the best of coffee's flavor. Actually, I don't want to use the word alchemist because alchemy is making metal to gold. The coffee's already gold. After that, it goes from the roaster to the barista. And the barista, they have to make sure it's the right coffee to water ratio, make sure it's the right coffee grind setting, make sure the water temperature is correct. And then over there pouring their coffee for you for 4 minutes when you're asking what's taking so long. You need to just be a little more patient. And this is how coffee gets to us every day, but we don't think about that. I had to also develop my ability in coffee because, again, I didn't know anything about coffee. To give you an idea, this is an embarrassing story. We're in a safe space, right? Inshallah. And I'll tell you the story just to let you know how I came into this. I walked into my first coffee farm in 2013. As a kid, I used to pick coffee cherries with my grandmother, right? And I didn't know there were coffee cherries. In America, we don't know where our food comes from. And so I remember years later when I started to watch a documentary on coffee, I was watching with my grandmother and taking notes, and she says, "Oh, they're doing the coffee wrong." I'm like, "How do you know, Grandma? How do you know?" She's like, "We have 200 trees in our house in India, dummy." That was a favorite thing to call me. It still is, yes. And so after that, when I went to this farm visit years later, I walked into that village where Hajj Ali was from, and I go up to the coffee trees. This was the first time I went to an actual coffee farm, all right? Months before that, I was on my bed in my living room, YouTubing these things, and Google and reading books. But now I'm actually here on this mountaintop village, looking at this coffee plant, and just having this moment, right? People who come from the outside in Yemen, they think they know everything. like we can see the matrix in things. And so I'm over there having my moment with my tree, like touching the leaves. I don't know anything about coffee trees or agronomy or anything like that. And in this moment I had one of the coffee farmers, he comes up to me and says, Mokhtar, I don't mean to bother you, but the coffee trees are over there. It was some other tree. And of course, growing up in the cities, they're taught to talk quick and move fast, right? So I was like, I know that, but these trees are in close proximity to coffee trees, and it affects health. In some cases, it's true, but definitely not in that case. But then I learned what typical varietal was. I learned when there's white stuff on the ground, that means there's too much sodium in the water. When there's yellow stuff on the leaves, that means it's the iron deficiency. This coffee's 5 years old. You need to prune that coffee or tip this coffee. And these, you learn, and it's okay to learn and to reinvent yourself. There's a really incredible old American proverb that says, sometimes you gotta fake it until you make it, right? So that's, in many ways, my story. So after that, we began to work with these farmers in these villages, and I took back samples from all these areas across Yemen, right? And at that time, no one had done that yet. Coffee is very different from different regions, cultivars and varietals. Unfortunately, we're taught that coffee is just one flavor, right? Coffee flavor. But it's not. And, in other things, there are different types of levels of quality. Even in cheese, for instance, we have, Velveeta and Kraft, right? But then you have a special aged Wisconsin cheese, or a special Comté, or Brie. And bread, you have Wonder Bread. And you have like a special baguette or sourdough. So in coffee, yeah, there's Starbucks. But there's also special types of coffee cultivars and special varieties. And when I say varietal, I want you guys to learn some things tonight. So like a varietal in apples, you have a cultivar, Granny Smith, and Fuji apples, and Pink Lady, right? Washington Big. These are different types of apples, and it tastes different. Granny Smiths are great for apple pies. In coffee, we have names like Typica, Bourgogne, Katwai. You might have a coffee from Kenya, a cultivar called the SL28 variety that has a lot of apple taste. Guatemala might have an incredible chocolate flavor to their coffee sometimes. Ethiopia has blueberry. And our coffees will change your life in Yemen. And so we brought these coffees to Coffee Night. And in coffee we have this science called coffee cupboard. And it's basically a language we learn. We grew up thinking taste is subjective. We all taste different and have different opinions of things, different preferences. But what this does, it makes it into one uniform language. And to become like a coffee sommelier is actually a course from a certified coffee taster called the Coffee Q course. In coffee we have two types of main species. There's a few more, but there's two major ones. Who knows what they are? I'm just going to point somebody here. The two species in coffee. Robusta, it's low elevation coffee, and then Arabica from Arabia. Something like 90% of the world's coffee is placed through Yemen. And we can talk about that later. But like one of my exams, I had to learn 36 different smells for coffee. I had to understand the 16 visual defects, the 5 organic acids, found in coffee, all these different things to be able to evaluate it. So essentially what you do is you have 5 cups for every coffee, 8.25 grams of roasted coffee, 155 milliliters of water temperature is between 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit, and you go around with this clipboard, right? And you're supposed to take a spoon and slurp it really aggressively. Like the more your mother would disapprove, the better. So you spit it to like a little spit cup, and then you write down your notes. And you're supposed to have a poker face, because you can't influence the person next to you. If I say I taste chocolate, now you taste chocolate, right? So I walked into my first coffee cup-in. It's called the cup-in, that's the name of this science. And I see people with their clipboards and their score sheets and they're writing things down and slip in and slurp in and spit in. And I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever, like the most pretentious thing I've seen, right? And then it gets worse. So at the end of this, about 45 minutes, you discuss what you taste. So this girl looked at me and said, "This coffee tastes like pink Starburst." And I looked at her like really confused. Like, did she just say pink Starburst? And then this other guy said, this coffee has a hint of baby carrots. Okay. And then the one that lost me, he looked me right in my eyes. He goes, this coffee is just too passive aggressive for me. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I totally see that. In my head, I'm like, no, I don't see that. Oh, what do you? It's just coffee. It does taste like coffee. To give you just a quick one-liner about this, we essentially taste one of 5 things. Sometimes they say 4. Something sour, something salty, sweet, bitter, or umami. So, and we actually can smell over 1 trillion things. So we mostly taste for our smell. I learned a lot from Dr. Lori Santos yesterday about the olfactory gland is where we taste things, but it's also where our memories are stored. It's very interesting. So oftentimes certain foods we just love and we get, our hearts change around certain things because of a memory we have from that thing, an association. And so, you taste something sour, right? Is it sour like a lemon sour, or green apple, or like battery acid? It's sweet. Is it like a nut, a chocolate, or a fruit? Okay, it's a fruit. Is it like a stone fruit? Is it like a berry, or is it like a citrus? No, it's a citrus. Is it clementine, or tangerine, or grapefruit? Like you begin to filter out to like find what that flavor is. That's how we taste things. But some people can go a bit overboard. You'll see them. And so we did this thing with my coffee samples. These 21 lots that I went around the country, right? From those lots, 19 failed basic standards. And they were really bad. They had a lot of defects, a lot of funky things going on. Some of them, one of them said they were DOA, death on arrival. And so it's out of 100 points, right? Anything above 80 points is what we consider specialty coffee. And so when I took that course, it took me a long time, but eventually I passed. I became the first Arab coffee cover curator. And this is ironic that we have a whole species named after us. And so out of 100 points, 80 plus points is what we call specialty coffee. Really incredible coffee. And it's developed based on the cultivar, terroir, the way it's processed, and the farmer who took care of it. 85 plus is really hard to get, and that's considered like really nice coffee. And 90 plus is what is really rare, and you're really lucky you taste that in your life. And so those 21 samples, 19 failed, but the other 2 they weren't okay. They were 90 plus. Yeah. I was really happy, and one of my teachers told me, these are some of the best coffees he's ever tasted in his life. So I was really excited because it was just, they tasted like mangoes and papaya, one of them. I really mean it, like it really tasted like that. And one was like a chocolate cherry, it was just an incredible like flavor. So I went back to those villages and I took more samples, but these were horrible. Even though they're from the same like farmers. And so I realized the way it was picked and processed and all that was arbitrary. So for me to make this thing work, we had to really begin on the ground with farmers and begin working with them to develop better quality coffee. Some companies have this weird like cigarette defect to it, and this is why. Tobacco flavored food. Like the way it was picked and processed, they would dry the coffees on the rooftops, which look nice in pictures, but there's dirt and gravel, there's no airflow, chickens poop. So a lot of funky fermentation happened there. And along, and it wasn't that they didn't know. The older generation, like they knew about coffee, and they knew there were poems about coffee, about the importance of using, when to use, organic fertilizer. إذا دخل شهر آذان يطلبن بلوغ حجاج. It's almost like if the month of January comes over, begin to fertilize your trees. These kinds of things. If you pick your coffee, you pick it when it's red, like poppy stone, the carnelian stone. And these things were, I used to use a lot in my talk to farmers. This is actually in Burak, the New Suleiman, which is not far from where your husband is from. And I wanted them to learn about the coffee, the journey it took from their village to where it landed. So with these kind of classes, this is one of my favorite pictures. and Abdurrahman's, and it's most of these are iPhone pictures. And so I realized I was in this one village, Bani Ismail, in the province of Khadija. And after a few months, I learned that the farmers had never tasted their coffee. Most of them, had never. And it's sad that many times producers, they don't know how the final product tastes. And this is the case even in chocolate. Something like 80% of the world's chocolate comes from West Africa. And there's these videos online you can see on YouTube of farmers in Cote d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast eating chocolate for the first time in their lives. Because they produce the raw product, they harvest it, it gets shipped to the cities, processed there, exported, roasted somewhere else, some other country, brewed somewhere else. And I honestly, I was holding back my emotion. I felt so, I lived a couple of hours away and I left the next day, went to my lab, roasted some coffees for them and came back. And then I had them taste their coffee. I had an Ethiopian, a Sumatran, and theirs. But I didn't tell them their coffee was on the table. So I went and I taught them how we slurp, and it's important when you work with farmers too, not to be arrogant. Maybe you studied in nice school or live in a different country, but you have to come with sort of a lot of humbleness, particularly to older people who have much more knowledge than you in many things. So I thought the older guy in the front, I thought he was angry, he seemed very annoyed. But he ended up being the best coffee taster. He really was incredible. And so at the end I asked each one of them, which one you guys like? All of them picked the middle coffee, which was their coffee. And so I actually lifted the cups because I wanted them to see it wasn't just me making this up. And you should see really the look of pride and happiness in their eyes. Especially this guy Khalid in the middle. But also, I wanted them to learn about their product. I think I have the only Chemex in Yemen, right? And so for them to see me, with my scale and my hand grinder and this fancy kettle, they were mesmerized. It was like a spectacle for them to watch. I remember this is one of my favorite pictures because it's 3 generations: the grandfather, the son, and the grandson. So he comes in late and he's like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And they go, "Shh, be quiet." And for 4 minutes, you just heard the coffee being filtered down, which was incredible. But I want them to learn your product, what you guys harvest, produce, and work so hard, it matters. People take it serious, and there's a science to it, and they value what you do. I want them to learn that they should do that. So I began to work with these farmers and figure out ways to improve their coffee. The first thing was paying them something that was not just fair. Fair trade is an important thing, and it was a great step. But I think sometimes we ask for, there's so much oppression that we just kind of push back and ask for the bare minimum, civil rights. I heard this community talk about we just ask for civil, or even the hashtag of Black Lives Matter, that we just matter. That's so hard to ask for. It really is difficult to understand that. So my question was, how much does someone need to get paid to live a dignified life? A life where they feel like they matter, right? And so we began to work with them and, picking better coffees, drying them on raised drying beds, these wonderful farmers. You can see Maggie, he still has cough in his mouth. And my goal was to get them to grow coffee instead of coffee, which was something that we were able to do and we'll learn about later. And so this was a time that was very difficult in the Middle East. This was right after and during the Arab Spring, which you guys know what that is. The idea that young people got together through social media mostly and decided that they wanted to live a different life. They wanted to have civil rights and to be treated equally and fairly and have the pursuit of happiness to be something that they could pursue against these, decade-long systems of oppression that really, were just horrible. And so Yemen was considered one of the successful ones after the Arab Spring, believe it or not. It was a very weak interim government in place. And all these different factions trying to get power. A lot of instability. There was some Al-Qaeda, and there was Somali pirates, and all these different things happened. Really a horrible time to start any business. I didn't know anything about business or about these things, so I thought I can do this. And so I think it's important to find something that you're all passionate about. Because when you find something you're passionate about, you will be able to go through many obstacles. When your passion outweighs your fears, anything really is possible. And so, as I was doing this, it was very difficult. And some of you know this, Dr. Aziz. The Houthi rebels began their march down from Sada, down from the north, into Sana'a. They took over the capital. The president resigns, runs away even. And all these things were happening around me. I looked at them and I maybe didn't want to see them. And didn't want to tell people, my family particularly. Because I know I went through a very difficult phase after that. And so, after that, I was still focused on this mission. And I was planning to come to a coffee conference in Seattle, actually, the Specialty Coffee Association, which is our coffee Olympics. 100 countries attend. And so my idea was, you guys work on coffee, I'll help you guys, I'll train you guys, I'll pay you more for better coffee, then I'll find people who can appreciate these coffees and buy them. And that's one thing I liked about my idea. I saw the NGO model and I didn't like it. I think nonprofit work is really important for relief work, which we'll definitely talk about in a bit today. First responders for crises, we need to be very generous and understand why they're important. But I think sometimes it can create some sort of dependency and really disempowers folks. And so my idea was how can we create a social enterprise that can empower people economically to really take care of their own destinies. This is not a charity. These farmers work really hard to produce this thing. They put so much of their life into it, and it's sustainable that way when you're able to do something like that. And so things really changed for me on March 25th, 2015. I was in the capital Sana'a, and I woke up that night. I heard these loud things around me, and I looked outside, and I saw what looked like. First of all, it was like laser beams. I was like, "What's going on?" And I realized I heard there were anti-aircraft machine guns are being shot, Saudi fighter jets. All I knew about war was what I saw in TV and movies and read about books. But I'll tell you, and I hope none of you ever have to experience this. And if you know people who've experienced war, be mindful to that. It's very difficult to understand it. To have a feeling of certainty around death. To really think about death in a very real way, a real possibility. I woke up, and this is a video actually I took a few days later. But to see these images, this was in Sana'a, near where I worked, and this is what I saw that night. I remember having to go online, and I remember saying to my parents, this was the worst thing I probably did as a son. I didn't know what would happen, so I didn't want my parents. I sent them initially, essentially a goodbye letter, and it was hard to say things like, I'm sorry I wasn't the best son I could be. I can't imagine the things that my mom and dad thought about and where I was. But I wanted to use whatever time I had or what I thought I had to send them, let them know how I felt. And then there were so many people I couldn't write to everybody. And after that, the first night was very difficult. The second night it got a little bit easier. And it's really sad in the way that our humans, we create these mechanisms. We're able to normalize war. After a few days, we're eating dinner, watching it those fireworks. People, so-and-so today was killed by a howitzer shell, so-and-so a sniper hit him today. And it becomes a normal thing in life. It's horrible. It really is. And so then you have other things that you deal with. So that night, actually, I haven't seen... that night, I was at the mill and I didn't know what to do. I was around my coffee. I down and I my coffee, right? And so I went to the mosque. All of a sudden, I heard that man call to prayer. And I can't read this chapter in the book, but it's a very powerful part where I heard that all these calls to prayers going around us, and bombs dropping, and earth shaking, and it was Yom Qiyamah. Really, it felt like the day of reckoning had come. And I went to the masjid. I'm like, okay, I'll go to the masjid now. And I go and I see people, they're actually in the masjid. It was pretty, a good amount of people praying in the masjid. So we get together and we're praying, and it was terrifying because every few seconds or moments, these missiles would hit, and you would hear, and then you would feel it. And then the ceiling would shake, dust would fall down. At one point, after the rukur, the imam makes this long supplication. And then we were, saying, Ameen, Ameen. Then he asks God to forgive us for our sins. Everyone in there cried. and they were weeping. It was like this moment. There's also a turning point because it was, I don't talk about this a lot, because I don't get to speak in front of the Muslims or people of faith, but it was a difficult place to be. I remember this sort of like feeling that I'm not in control anymore. Whatever God wills is going to happen. And there was this really amazing liberation. I felt it's not in my control anymore, and if I live, if I die, it doesn't matter. And after that, after like you kind of feel like you died, I'm dead. And and I remember this interview that Malcolm X did, which is his anniversary of his martyrdom, I think next week. He said in an interview, it was really close to when he was killed. He said, "I'm a man who's lived like he died 20 years ago." And I understood what that meant. So at that point, I felt like, it is what it is. And I go back to the mill after that, and I'm about to go to sleep. And then I get this text message. My phone, like, the light turns on. It was a Facebook message, right? And I look at should I look at this phone right now? I should just go to sleep. I look, and it was someone else, my friend who I actually haven't seen since that time. Just your message, what does someone want? I look at it, and she's like, "Hey, I heard that there is a Greek ship. You remember Athens tomorrow morning at like 9:30, but I'm not sure." You ever have those friends who like give you really detailed advice, and then like, "Hey, but I'm not sure." Right, so I see this and like I said, "Okay, what am I gonna do now?" I get up, I decide to pray istikhara, our prayer to ask God for guidance again. So I prayed this prayer, and I felt okay. I should go down. But Athens is like 9.5 hours to drive down in the middle of the night. This is midnight now. Of course, I can't tell my family. So I went and I told a friend of mine, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, we have some people in the neighborhood who can come with me." And they have this truck, this flatbed truck. So we go. I went and got my coffee samples, for this conference. In my mind, I still believed I was going to go to this conference. And so I took the coffee samples in the Samsonite bag, and after that, I got these two friends of mine. I never met these people in my life. I don't know them, but I know the person knows them. And so we go in the car, this truck, we drive in the middle of the night through dozens of checkpoints, and we get to one city called Yedim. It was the night that the Sabani truck, this yogurt truck, was hit by a missile, and dozens of civilians were killed. We got there, and there were people who were burned, and it was just a really difficult thing to see. And then I continued. We continued to get down to Aden. And I never talk about this publicly really often. The book, The Last Story, is very, it goes to this part, but you're already here somewhere, so I'll talk about it. And I get to Aden, the city in the south, and I'm texting someone this whole time, figuring things out. So I need to go to Hawaii, right? And I'm in this place, this one area in Aden. People are leaving Aden, and we're like the only ones going down there. People, their whole families on these trucks full of like all their belongings. We get there, and it was a very difficult situation. I ended up being kidnapped twice. The first time, I told them that someone was my fiance, which I'm not. Her husband is over there. And then, long series of events. Like what happened was we had an interview on Al Jazeera, right? It was like an Al Jazeera article about us. My friends were angry because one of my friends, he was like, "I said, don't stay away from the media. Don't do any interviews. Don't talk about guns. Don't do any of these kind of things." And so he goes to sleep, and the next morning there's an article that came out. Me, I was just with her, and I'm jumping out of a truck with a rifle in my hand, and there was like this weird line. I don't know why I said these things, but anyways, but someone was also interviewed. She also had her gun story with her gun, her purse. And I don't have any guns here, and I'm sure you don't have any guns, but it's a difficult place to live. Sometimes you have to have different things that you don't normally want to. And so because of that article, my friend in Sana'a, he knew I was going to see a girl named Sana'a. Found this article on Facebook, contacted someone. He knew where we were because the people who had detained us, it was difficult. Like they blindfolded us and tied us up and threw us. It was a hard thing to go through. They They took our phones, and they didn't know how to use our phones correctly. One of the iPhone thing. He left the phone on. So my friend knew where we were. He told her we're in this hotel in Nukhl Khadid. That's the name of it. I remember that. And you'll read about it, but after that I was able to escape. Actually, when someone first came to help me get out, her and her mom. And her mother has a very Brooklyn accent. So I go up and they had to hide their identity, so they were wearing the niqab. So I go up to someone, I'm like, someone, I'm so sorry. Like, listen, do not feel guilty. I came here, this was my decision, and then it was her mom. She also covered up. I'm over here, but I'm sorry. And so I go up to her mom, and then I'm talking to her mother, and there was a sniper that was on top of the hotel, and he started to hit towards us. So we had to run, and but in this jail, in this prison where I was, detained, I heard one of the guards talk about the port of Mokha, and that there were shipments going to East Africa, Somali pirates and certain things. And so in my mind, I said, well, like, if I ever escaped or made it out, that's what I would do. It wasn't even a thought that I could say out loud. When you're in these places in hardship, you don't want hope to think about hope. There's a book by Obama, I think called The Audacity of Hope. Because it's hard sometimes, because when you have a lot of hope, you can get let down too. But it's important to have hope, because it's what's going to eventually help you and push you and get you out of those moments. And so, I planned this on my head, right? And through these series of events and through someone has saved my life in a very real way. I would not be here to talk to you tonight. I made it out of court, and we made it to the capital. My parents, were terrified, and like, okay, just, stay put. Don't do anything stupid anymore. I hadn't really processed what I went through. It was the day before, and so I decided I'm going to go to Mokha, or Mokha, and I'm going to go out from there. I went to see, there's just like the horrible scenes in these cities across the land. I was still trying to taste my coffee, make sure it was good. And it's hard to do that when you hear the machine guns outside in war. And so I don't like to romanticize guns and these kind of things. It's not something that one wants to be part of, And so I got this truck, took my friends, and we drove to the other side of the country, to the port of Mokha. I get to the port of Mokha. First thing I do is I had already contacted the official historian of Mu'arrikh and Muqadi al-Mokha, the head judge of Mokha, Sheikh Adil. And he took me to the Mokha's and his great sanctuary, the Maqam. And I see the old masjid in the city, which is really a skeleton of its former shelf. There's nothing there really. And I learned from him that the monk, the sheikh, he went to Hajj. And then from there he went to Jerusalem, Palestine. He went down to Egypt, to Sudan, and then to Ethiopia, to a city called Harar in East Ethiopia. And he married a woman from Harar. And I think that's where he found God. That's my own opinion. And so my friend's like, hey, you need to leave, bro. It's like, there's war here. You have to come back to the ship. Because we heard there was another ship. And this one was about, I think it was 160 Somali passengers and 11 tons of onions. Whatever. I said, I'll pass this ship. And it was supposed to be a 3-day journey to cross the Red Sea to East Africa. We get there, the ship isn't working, there's no diesel. There were warnings that they were going to bomb the port. And so they had bombed both airports, by the way. That's why I didn't leave on the airplane. They bombed both airplanes, all the ports, except for this one port. And so the first thing I did was I contacted my State Department. I'm a U.S. citizen. I pay taxes, right? Their official response was, I'm sorry, we cannot help you currently. What we can do is relay your messages to your loved ones via our website. I felt really abandoned. And, especially because other countries with less resources, I think India, Pakistan, China, Russia were taking out hundreds of their citizens. So as an American, I felt really not conflicted or confused. I was angry. I knew those bombs weren't made in the U.S. And Saudi. They're made here. These were our tax dollars. And it was a difficult place because I was the wrong type of American. Or maybe I prayed wrong, or I had the wrong skin color. But for whatever reason, my life didn't matter in that moment to our government here. And so I I couldn't leave through that way. We even had a website. One of my friends, who is a Yale alumni, Yaman Salahi, incredible lawyer, he had set up a website for us, stuckinyemen.org. It just sounds funny, but we had 600 Americans that signed up, Yemeni Americans that were in Yemen. And we had this incredible group of people that me and someone on this this Facebook message group with lawyers from the ACLU and CARE and CCR, all these wonderful organizations, trying to figure out a solution. They had press conferences for us in city halls and rallies. Nothing happened. And so I realized, nothing's going to happen unless I make it happen. No one's going to come save me. I understood the history of this country. I know we're just collateral damage. That's what's going to happen. But really, I just wanted to go to that conference. Throughout all of this, I kept this idea of this conference. And with Dave, for a long time, he spent 3 years following me writing this book about my life. And he kept asking this question, why did I have to go to this conference? It was until 3 years later, when we were being interviewed, and he revealed something to me. He said, when I was asking this, Mokhtar, what you did was ridiculous to risk your life to go to a coffee conference. And as soon as he said that, I realized, that does sound ridiculous, And I kept thinking, why did I care so much about this conference? Why did I risk my life to go to it? And I landed on two things. The first was that I had promised these farmers this thing. I promised them something, and I looked them in their eyes. And when you give someone hope, that's a really heavy burden to bear. It really is, and I need to figure a way to make this happen for them. The second, which was interesting, was that maybe on a deeper level, I created this idea that I latched onto to keep me sane, to keep me functioning and going. To believe in something. And my therapist likes to think of that, the latter one, that's the reason. So I go to the port, and we were supposed to catch this ship that didn't work anymore. They said, well, there's a smaller ship, it's a boat. It's called a Viper. I'm like, all right. I'm like, it'll take you 1 day to cross instead of 3 days. So in my mind, I'm thinking something like a Dodge Viper, right? Some kind of Pablo Escobar looking speedboat. And I get to the port. And he meant fiber, like fiberglass. And we had this. It's a small dinghy. There was this looks like a nice postcard, right? It has even a bird in the background there. Because I'm a millennial, I have to pictures everything. And so I looked at that boat and I said, you know what, all right, I guess it's gonna happen. We're going on this boat ride. This became my getaway selfie later. But on a really serious note, we hear these stories of refugees from Syria and from countries like Eritrea and Libya. And you think about the journeys they take. They put their whole families on these little boats. And then you hear about these horrific scenes of bodies of children kind of washed up on shores in Greece or in Italy. And it's I experienced that, and to really put yourself in that position to think this is my only option. To stay and die or put my faith into a boat on a piece of wood. And it's hard to think about that situation. There's that poet, she's a really incredible poet, her name is Orson Shire. And she said that people don't leave land to go into the ocean unless the whole city is fleeing. And it's something I hope none of you ever have to experience. And so at that point I had sent my probably third message to my parents. And I remember I made this prayer to God. For me, I think it's important to believe in something. Allah, God, Yahweh, the Force, whatever it is you need to believe it to live a better life, right? And I made this prayer and I said, God, please help me. You helped Moses and his people. You helped save them and help them cross this ocean, this sea. Help me cross it today. I went the other way, right? But I did the same thing. And I jumped on the boat, and as soon as I got on, within 30 minutes or so, then I realized we're in the water now, we're in the ocean. it was like Moby Dick status. It really was a wave. Like I joke, you know, because I think people go through difficulties. All we have left is our humor, right? So we joke about life. And so I'm like, I'm in this now, and I'm realizing like, why did I put myself in this position? You know, I think about my family, I think about like everyone in my life, and now like, you know, they could have found my body if I died in the end. Like, I'm in the ocean. If I died here, what's gonna happen? Anyway, so we eventually make it, you know, and this whole time you can see my earphones. I had, you know, for me, like there were things that helped me calm and be and steady, and besides reciting Quran and my recitation that helped. I listen to hip hop and R&B, and like so like certain songs really calm me down, right? Halo by Beyonce. Mariah Carey. But I had downloaded, like I had the album that just came out by Drake. If you're listening to this, it's too late. There's a song called Now and Forever, where he goes, I'm gone. I don't want to miss my boat. I'm afraid I'm going to die before I get to where I'm going. I gotta go. And it's like I'm listening to like this whole time, and I had iced coffee too, by the way, which is not a great mix for adrenaline. But anyway, so I go through we cross the Red Sea, we get to Djibouti, a country that, you know, I hope I'll get a bunch of here. I never thought in my life I'd ever go to Djibouti. Like, it was a country that I made fun of as a kid. But Djibouti